A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Techgig webinar series. Our topic for today's session is Windows Apps, Expand Your Horizons. And we have with us today Mr. Mark D'Souza. He is the Director of Audience Marketing at Microsoft. Mark primarily focuses on enabling the software developer community in India, especially in Windows 8 and Windows Phone platforms. He has over 17 years of IT experience and in a prior role managed a portfolio of IT applications as Group Program Manager at the Business Intelligence Center of Excellence, Microsoft IT. In 2002, Mark was selected as one of the initial Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals from India for his contributions to the local technical communities. Prior to Microsoft, Mark worked with Sagacious Technologies and CDAC. So before I hand over the session to Mark today, here are a couple of quick tips for all the attendees who have joined in. As a normal practice, our guest speaker today will take us through the presentation for the first 45 minutes, and we will open up the session for a quick round of question and answer right at the end. We will also launch a couple of poll questions during the session. In case of any problem in terms of audio or connection otherwise, request all the attendees to inform me immediately, and we will do the needful. Without any further delay, I now hand over the session to Mark. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Sri Lagna. Sri Lagna, let me know once you can see my screen.
Yes, Mark, I can see your screen now.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello everyone. First of all, thanks for attending this webinar on a Wednesday evening. I see that a few of the attendees continue to trickle in, so I'll probably spend a little bit of time walking you through what we're going to cover and then plunge right away into the actual content. As Sri Lagna mentioned, we'll also have some amount of time, hopefully at least about 15-20 minutes towards the end to take questions. You can type your questions in the question box and Sri Lagna will send them across to me and I'll try and answer as many as possible. In case we run out of time for too many questions or we are unable to cover all the questions at the end, remember that you can also post on the event page itself. There's a discussion forum there, and even after the event I'll be glad to answer questions over there. So as all of you are aware, today's webinar will focus on Windows apps and how you can expand your own horizons using or creating apps on Windows. We'll talk a little bit about the various opportunities that exist on the Windows platform, and we'll also talk about the various resources that are available for you to ramp up in terms of learning how to build applications on Windows, specifically Windows 8, and how to learn about the new modern UI and so on. You might also remember that we posted a bunch of questions that we said would get answered in this webinar. Hopefully you're able to see that. Sri Lagna, can you confirm that you can see the next slide?
Yes, I can see the slide on agenda.
The agenda, yes. So we had posted some of these questions on the webinar event page itself. One of the key things we'll address today is what are the various opportunities that exist on the Windows platform for various app builders. How can you learn modern user experience design? How can you learn to build Windows apps, and also how can you cloud enable your apps? And we'll talk a little bit about various cloud computing offerings that we have available for app builders. The next set of questions that we'll answer is about what kind of resources are available for you and assistance that you can get locally in India. And one of them is the App Lab. We'll talk a little bit about that. We also have an App Builders Club, which is a community of folks who create apps on the Windows platform. And finally, we have an app review board, which is again another community which gives feedback based on the apps that have already been published onto the Windows Store. And this is a pure feedback mechanism, so it's essentially other app builders giving feedback to their fellow mates in terms of how they can improve their app. and so on. And we'll tell you how you can also, those of you interested, how you can become part of this, both the App Builders Club as well as the App Review Board.
Mark, let me know if
plunging
you...
right in.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me know if you want me to
Yes,
launch...
Srilagna.
If you want me to launch the poll questions now.
The polls? Yes. Yes, yes.
Okay,
so before we launch the polls, Srilagna, let me just set some context. So one
Sure.
of the key things that I'd like to know about the attendees, I see that there are close to about over 100 attendees right now, is an understanding of how your backgrounds and so on, so that I can tailor the content accordingly. So Srilagna, if you can go ahead and put up the first poll.
Certainly, I'm just doing that now. Please let me know, Mark, if you can view the question along with the options on your screen. We are going to keep the...
I cannot see the poll, Srilagna, but I'm assuming the attendees can.
Yeah, okay, because it has appeared on my screen as well. And yes, the attendees are taking the poll now. Let us keep it open for the next 10-15 odd seconds and we'll close it.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and I'm sharing the results. Please confirm if you can view the result right now on your screen. If you can't, then I'm going to read it out. Can you view the results?
So I can't see the results, Srilagna, so you might want to just read it out.
Sure. So the poll question was, for how many years have you worked in the IT industry? Around 20% said no, zero. Around 21% said less than or equal to 2 years. 35% said more than 2 years but less than or equal to 6 years. And around 25% said more than 6 years.
All right. Okay, good. So that's an interesting mix of folks. It looks like we have about 20% or so with no experience, so basically freshers, about 20% with less than 2 years, about 35% in the 2 to 6 year range, and then about another 25% or so more than 6 years, right?
Correct.
All right. Go ahead and put up the next poll, Srilagna.
I'll do that. I have launched the second poll question now. All right, closing the poll. 50%. Okay, so the question was, do you currently use a Windows 8 tablet, laptop, desktop on a regular basis? 50% said yes and 50% said no.
Okay, interesting. So that's quite a large number of you who are already familiar with Windows 8, so that's good. And then you can do the last poll, the third poll, Srilagna.
Yes, Mark. I have launched the third poll as well. All right, let's close this poll now and I'll share. Okay, so the question was, how familiar are you with Visual Studio? And 47% said beginner, 35% intermediate, and 18% said advanced.
All right. All right, thanks, Srilagna. Can you hand over the presentation back to me?
I'll just do that. We can now view your screen.
All right. All right, so we'll plunge right into the content. So let me set some context around the direction in which the industry is moving. As many of you might be aware, there are a multitude of devices that have emerged in the marketplace, and these devices have taken different kinds of form factors. You've seen tablets, you've seen smartphones, you've seen all-in-one machines, you've seen hybrid machines, which are sometimes a laptop, sometimes a tablet, and so on. And these devices are proliferating. In fact, there's even been a whole category, a new category of devices called phablets, which are sometimes phones and sometimes tablets also, which have come out. And the emergence of these wide variety of form factors with respect to devices brings a huge opportunity for you as a solution builder or an app builder. Similarly, another parallel industry trend has emerged, and that's around services. And when I talk about services, I talk about cloud computing, I talk about big data and so on, which essentially are backends to the app, and which enable you as a solution builder and app builder create very interesting experiences on multiple form factors without having to write code again and again for different form factors. So you could have shared code and shared databases that reside in the cloud, and different native apps that exist for each of the different form factors that exist in terms of devices. From an industry perspective, we've kind of moved from a client-server model wherein you had clients, which could be desktops and so on, accessing servers, which could be either a physical server in a particular location or even a web server sitting out there, to a model in which you now have devices accessing the cloud, where the cloud could pretty much exist anywhere, and could also keep changing geographically, where you would have geographically replicated instances of a web farm, for example. And the devices are not just restricted to desktops. The devices, like we just discussed, have also encompassed tablets, have encompassed phones, and have even encompassed gaming consoles, for example, Xbox Live, and so on. Now, therefore, if you think of yourself as an app builder or a solution builder, this unleashes a really massive opportunity for you to take advantage of. And we'll talk about the opportunities both from a devices perspective as well as from a services perspective. So from a devices perspective, if you look at the range of devices that Windows 8 empowers, these span across tablet devices, laptops, desktops, all-in-ones, and so on. And all of them sharing the same common operating system, which is Windows 8, which recently, of course, underwent a refresh, and you now have Windows 8.1. For those of you who mentioned that you've already started using Windows 8 in some flavor or the other, you would have realized that it not only has the traditional desktop mode, which is very similar to Windows 7, but it also has a touch-friendly new UI, and which is explicitly designed for touch-enabled machines. And if you think about it now, in terms of the ways phones have evolved, maybe 5 years ago, not many of us would have had touch-enabled phones, but right now, I guess pretty much all of us have access to touch-enabled phones, and this is because of the improvements in hardware and also in terms of reductions of cost to get to touch-enabled phone devices. The similar trend is quite likely to occur even with traditional laptops, desktops, and so on, wherein most of our current desktops and laptops may not be touch-enabled, but with the emergence of low-cost hardware and touch-enabled screens, they will become almost as commonplace as the way we take touch on our phones for granted today. So therefore, Windows 8 is designed keeping that trend in mind, that soon pretty much any screen will become a touch-enabled screen. And from a perspective of a developer, we in Microsoft kept in mind that many of you have existing skill sets. Your existing skill sets may be in .NET, might be in Java, might be in HTML or JavaScript, might even be with C++. And what we try to do is to see how we can leverage your existing skill sets in order to be able to empower you to be able to build Windows Store apps. And you'll see that the current development model for Windows 8 supports not only our traditional .NET, C#, XAML, and so on, but also web technologies like HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, which are first-class citizens while building a Windows Store app. So which means that if you are even if you are a web developer and are familiar with HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, you are perfectly capable of building a Windows Store app, and you do not necessarily need to know only .NET or C# or XAML and so on. Similarly, if you're a C++ developer, there's a wide range of support available for you to create native Windows Store apps using C++, and we'll deep dive into all these options a little later in today's webinar. So moving on, in terms of the refresh that came in recently, which was Windows 8.1, we focused primarily on enabling the latest generation of hardware. As you know, that processor technology is improving. We've also introduced significant platform and UX improvements in terms of feedback that we've received from customers on Windows 8, and we've incorporated a lot of that feedback. And we also continue making Windows available on ARM architectures. So we don't just support Intel x86 architectures, but also support ARM architectures, and that's where you'll see the emergence of Windows 8 RT. Those of you who have used Windows 8.1 would have realized that we have a lot of improvements in terms of the personalized start and lock screens. You can now have multiple apps running at the same time and sharing screen space. There is a deep integration with Bing. There's deep SkyDrive integration, which means your apps can not only take advantage of local storage, but also cloud storage using SkyDrive. And of course, we have multiple tile sizes that are also available. If you've already built an app on Windows 8, it becomes a lot easier to move your app to Windows 8.1. But we've also embraced a whole bunch of standards, including WebGL, including various W3C standards as part of Windows 8.1. We also have W3C pointer event support to allow standardized touch, pen, and mouse support across your apps. There are a range of APIs that are available for you to take advantage of, which includes PDF rendering, text-to-speech, fingerprint reader support. We also support 3D printing, and some of you might have seen some videos that we've created around how Windows 8 is one of the first operating systems to actually support 3D printing. Of course, it's a different matter altogether that 3D printers themselves are not readily available in all geographies right now, but this is an emerging trend, and it's a very exciting trend that you could potentially have a 3D printer and you could create an app on Windows 8 which essentially enables you to create interesting artifacts, pretty much almost like a mini factory right within your house or within your office. And that technology is now empowered using Windows 8. Of course, the hardware technology around the 3D printers needs to become a little bit more easily available, and we expect that to happen over the next few years. But this is really a a thought leading kind of move in terms of being able to support 3D printing, because we definitely see that as an emerging technology that people will be interested in. Also, in terms of hardware innovation, you will also see smaller tablets. So while initially we used to support about 10.1 inch Windows tablets, we now have 8-inch Windows tablets also, so which means that you can have smaller form factors. And of course, we also support extremely large screens. So for example, there are some 32-inch plus inch devices that exist, especially in the all-in-one range, which are supported by Windows 8. Also extremely high resolution displays. The notebooks are thinner and lighter. The battery enabled all-in-ones are also opening up exciting scenarios. So for example, you could potentially have an all-in-one which is placed horizontally instead of vertically and being used almost like a tablet surface, wherein multiple people in the house could potentially use that computer during their leisure time. So all these as an app builder, these open up really interesting opportunities for you to create interesting applications, games, as well as business solutions. The store itself is one of the mechanisms to make people aware that your app exists, and also helps you promote your app by having areas like the spotlight, which make it easy for users to access the most popular apps. In India, we've been working with a wide range of publishers, and one of the most recent exciting wins that we've had in India has been the IRCTC. So for example, I think most of you would have visited the IRCTC website at some point or the other to book a train ticket. And this is one of the, probably one of the world's largest, most frequently visited websites. Now, as many of you might have experienced, obviously the website has its limitations in terms of the user experience and so on. So it was felt that it would be really interesting to have a native Windows Store app through which you could be able to transact on the IRCTC backend. I'm pleased to kind of announce that the IRCTC app is currently live on the Windows Store, and I encourage all of you to try it out. Of course, it still requires that you need to set up a login on the IRCTC website before you are actually able to use the app. But once you've done that initial setup, then you can actually go ahead and experience the IRCTC app in a native Windows Store mode. And the interesting thing is that this currently doesn't exist in any other platform. It currently exists only on Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8. And this kind of illustrates to you about one of the key growth areas that we're seeing in the tablet market, that even though we as Microsoft might have been slightly later in the game in terms of targeting the tablet market, there is definitely strong momentum that we're seeing, and the fact that really big apps like these are emerging on the store makes it something that all developers should definitely consider in terms of expanding your own horizon. I'll also talk about certain resources that we have for those amongst you who might already be building apps for other platforms like iOS and Android, and how you can take that existing knowledge that you might have about building apps for tablets or phones using other platforms like iOS and Android, and port that over to Windows 8 also to expand the base of customers that you might want to target. And there are specific resources that we have for developers who might have pre-existing apps on other platforms and who want to make sure that the porting experience is as seamless as possible, or involves a minimum amount of code changes. For those of you, there were a small percentage of folks who said that they were not completely familiar with Windows 8. So I'll spend just about a minute or two to show you a little bit about what Windows 8 looks like. And if you see the start screen right now, hopefully all of you are able to see the start screen. You'll notice that in addition to the various apps that are available as tiles on my screen, I also have live tiles. And so, for example, I have a finance app which shows me today's Sensex chart. So you'll see that there is a chart with the Sensex, similarly the NASDAQ, and so on. And this power of having live tiles, wherein you don't just have static icons on your start screen, but these tiles actually are conveying some interesting content. So for example, in the weather app, you'll see that it's showing me that the weather in Mumbai, where I'm currently located, is about 28 degrees Celsius. The air is slightly smoky. Hopefully there's no fire around in the building nearby. I guess it's just probably smoggy. Similarly, the news app shows me some news and so on, and this keeps changing as the day passes by. And similarly, if I want to actually click through within a particular application and see details, like in this case, I've clicked the finance app and I want to see the details of the Sensex, I'm able to do that also just like you would normally expect for any other app. But the concept of live tiles is unique because Windows is probably the only operating system right now that has this concept of having smart start screens which have live tiles and the ability to be able to show you dynamic data. Now this gives you as a programmer immense opportunity, because you can now start thinking about features that you can add to existing apps which will take advantage of the concept of live tiles, which will take advantage of the concept of push notifications and so on, such that your end user or your customer of your app can get a much better experience with the overall scenarios that you're creating for them. The thought that many of you might be going through your mind is, all this is great from a consumer perspective, but what about the enterprise? How does Windows 8 offer me an opportunity if my day job is not about creating consumer apps that go onto a store, but if my day job is about creating line of business applications, which are related to B2B scenarios, which are related to commercial scenarios, and which may not be related to apps that are going onto a store, but might be apps which are working in an intranet mode, for example. The good news is that over 200 million information workers have said that they would like to use a Microsoft Windows tablet for work, and there is a strong move within enterprises to consider Windows 8 as the next procurement for their office machines. Now, what this indicates to you is that this is a growing opportunity for you as a line of business app solution provider or a commercial app builder to consider the Windows 8 platform and all the associated features in the platform in your next project or in your next solution. From a store perspective, there are close to about 100,000 apps in the Windows Store, and these include top apps like Hulu, Netflix, Twitter, Facebook, and so on. And of course, I encourage you to try out the store yourself. But we'll quickly dive into what would it take for you as an app builder to start developing apps for Windows 8.1. The tools that you would typically need would be some design tools and some development tools. From a design perspective, as you know, Windows 8 specifically uses the metaphor of the modern UI and a very specific design language. And later on in the webinar, I will share with you links through which you can learn a little bit more about the unique user experience, look and feel that is required for Windows 8 or that is required for developing an app for Windows 8. And Expression Blend, which comes as part of Visual Studio, is one of the tools that you could potentially use for designing your apps. But of course, you're free to use other tools also, and some of you might be familiar with Adobe tools and all that. Could potentially also use that and then eventually import that into Visual Studio, which is essentially the development tool that you will use. And it's good to know that many of you are familiar with Visual Studio. Some of you, of course, are beginners, some of you are intermediate, and a few of you are advanced. But Visual Studio is essentially the tool that you would use to develop apps using various technologies. You could use C++, you could use C#, you could even develop using HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, the question that might arise in your mind is, how do you get access to Visual Studio? Again, the good news is that for an individual developer, if you are trying this out within your own free time, for example, and not necessarily part of your day job, you can consider downloading Visual Studio Express 2013 for Windows 8. That is freely available, and towards the end of my presentation, I'll share the links from which you can download that. It's a free download. Of course, if you're in an organization and if you have Visual Studio Professional Edition, for example, as part of your organization, then that could be something that you could also consider using. You'll get a few more additional features as part of Visual Studio Professional Edition, obviously. But Visual Studio Express Edition is good enough to get you started in terms of developing your first Windows Store app, and it contains everything that you need to be able to get an app into the store. Visual Studio also enables a whole bunch of performance tuning and analytics that you can run on your application. This is something that not many people often are aware of, but this is something that we encourage you to leverage as part of excuse me. We encourage you to leverage as part of the entire Visual Studio tool set itself. And profiling is a very important part in terms of making sure that your app performance stays as expected, and so that your updates that you push out to your apps continue to improve performance based on feedback that you might gather. For example, if your app crashes in certain scenarios, as part of the Windows Store, as part of the Developer Center, we give you diagnostics, or we give you tracking mechanisms to be able to track the scenarios in which your app might have crashed, and so that you can make the improvements in your app in the next version update or release that you put out. In terms of the various APIs, of course, I won't go through this into detail because this itself would be a separate webinar, but at the high level, we cover a whole range of APIs spanning from the fundamentals, which include things like threading, memory management, globalization, cryptography, authentication, as well as diagnostics. And then moving on to areas like communications and data, wherein we support local storage, we support XML and JSON, SMS, background transfer, and networking. We also support a whole range of graphics capabilities, which includes Direct 3D, Direct 2D, which you typically use for gaming scenarios. We also support WebGL. Like I mentioned earlier in the session, we support 3D printing. And from a devices perspective, we support things like obviously Bluetooth, USB, Wi-Fi, geolocation, sensors, which is another big emerging market. You'll see that there are many laptops and tablet devices which come inbuilt with a whole range of sensors, which include things like accelerometers, for example, to detect the tilt of the tablet, and so that you can actually take advantage of that within your own apps. And finally, from a UI perspective, we support accessibility. For those of you who are not familiar with this term, accessibility essentially is to enable your applications to be accessible to people who might have some form of disability. The disability could be visual impairment, it could be speech impairment, hearing impairment, and so on. And this is really something important to keep in mind when you're developing, that whenever you're developing an app, you should remember that there might be people who are using your app who may not have all the capabilities that a normal human has, and therefore they might have diminished vision, they might have diminished hearing, or may have even some issues with being able to move a mouse, for example, but might be able to access your app using touch. So those are things that you can keep in mind. We also support live tiles and toast, like I mentioned, which are notification mechanisms, as well as HTML5, CSS, and XAML from a front-end perspective. Moving on, so how will you get started in terms of developing your first Windows 8 app? The things that you will require will obviously, you'll need to have some flavor of Windows 8 on your machine. Now, if you already have Windows 8 as the primary operating system on your machine, that's great. If you don't, let's say, for example, you have Windows 7 on your machine, then one of the options that you have is to download the Windows 8.1 Enterprise Trial, and the URL should be appearing on your screen right now. Once you download this trial, we would suggest that, because it's a trial edition, we would suggest that you can install it in dual boot mode, so that you can retain your existing operating system exactly as it is without anything impacting whatever you might be running on that, and then use this Windows 8 trial version for your development, for your learning purposes, and so on, until such time as when you feel comfortable enough to make Windows 8 your primary machine. But while you're in the learning phase, we definitely recommend that you should consider installing the Windows 8 trial in a dual boot mode, so that you don't lose any of your existing work that you might have in whatever existing operating system you have. In terms of the development tool, you will use Visual Studio 2013, which is available, like I mentioned, VS Express 2013 for Windows. The URL is also put up there on the screen. You should be able to download that for free and get started with developing your first Windows 8 app. To help you build your first Windows 8 app, we in India have created about 75 Windows 8 templates. Think of templates as a starter kit. When you want to develop your first app, you might be slightly clueless about what kind of design to use. You may not be completely comfortable with the new modern UX uh, design metaphor that is required to be done in to be used in Windows 8 apps. So therefore, to help you get started and give you examples of some of the designs that you can use for your apps, we've created 75 plus templates, and these are essentially starter kits. They don't contain any business logic, or they don't contain any meaningful logic as such in terms of coding, but they contain designs which are like a skeleton on which you can build upon, and you can then add your own functionality and logic to it. So feel free to go ahead and use it. These are available on Codeplex. Codeplex is a website that Microsoft runs for open source code that we put out there. I know some of you might be surprised that Microsoft has an open source website called Codeplex, but it's been in existence for multiple years, and there's a lot of projects out there, not just by us, but even by external folks in the community who've put out projects which are available publicly for consumption at no cost. So we encourage you to go ahead and use those templates as the case may be, depending upon your app idea. Of course, please make sure that you're adding some value over and above the templates and not just using the templates as they are, because the templates are a starting block. They are not the end of the app. They are not the culmination of the app. The template should simply be the starting point of your app, and then we expect you to build more functionality and more features into that as the case may be. Similarly, for those of you who have created an iOS app or an Android app in the past, and you're thinking about how you can port that app over, or how you can reuse some of the code, some of the guidance that would be useful for you is available on the links that I mentioned there. So aka.ms/iOS will take you to the relevant resources for porting over iOS apps, and similarly aka.ms/Android will take you to the resources correspondingly for Android. Let's say you've now built your first app after a few weeks, and you want to publish your app onto the store. What would you then require? You need to have a developer account. The developer account for an individual is available on a 1-year subscription. So you typically need to purchase a 1-year subscription as an individual, and the current cost is $19, $19 for an individual, and $99 for a company. And this is for the Windows Store account, the developer account. The good news is that once you set up a developer account for 1 year, you not only get access to the Windows Store, but you also get access to the Windows Phone Store. So which means if you're interested in creating apps for the phone, you could also publish your apps there, and it's the same one developer account gives you access to both the stores for 1 year. And for students, of course, this is available for free through the dreamspark.com website. And students who have access to dreamspark.com can get a developer account for free. Moving on. So in terms of the technologies, like I mentioned earlier on in the webinar, you have the choice of picking the technology that you're going to build your app with. You could choose, for example, if you're a web developer, you could choose to create your app, your native Windows app, using HTML and JavaScript. And some of you, especially those of you who had many years of experience in the industry, might wonder how you could create a native app using HTML5 and JavaScript. And that's the beauty of Windows 8, is that because HTML5 and JavaScript are first-class citizens in terms of creating a Windows Store app, just equivalent to C#, .NET, XAML, just equivalent to C++, and so on. All of these are treated as first-class citizens on Windows 8, and you can create an app using any of these technologies. So let's say you were a web developer, or you are a web developer, and you're familiar with HTML and JavaScript. This will enable you to use that existing knowledge, as well as a whole bunch of third-party open source commercial libraries that exist, to create a native Windows Store app. And to give you an example of some of the apps that are already built using HTML and JavaScript, these are existing live apps that are already in the store. The store app itself is built using HTML5 and JavaScript. So the Windows Store app is itself built using HTML5 and JavaScript. Similarly, the music app, the weather app, the Skype app, the health and fitness app, the finance app that you just saw where I've shown you the BSE Sensex, the mail app, the news app, the people app, all of these are built using HTML5 JavaScript. Now, what about those of you who are familiar with .NET or existing .NET developers or familiar with XAML or C#, C++? The good news is that you can continue with your existing skill sets and knowledge of that and continue building apps on the Windows platform. XAML, which is essentially the front end, and C#, VB, or C++, depending on the language that you're comfortable with, will help you take your existing knowledge that you have for creating either desktop or server-based apps, or even in some of you who have already started creating phone apps. Take that existing knowledge and create compelling Windows Store apps, right? So it's not a very steep learning curve for you based on your existing set of skills that you might have. Now, this is an important slide. We get asked this question very frequently in terms of what if I was trying to build an app for desktops, tablets, all-in-ones, as well as phones, and I wanted to reuse some of my code, right? So the good news is that as part of the .NET binary reuse philosophy that we have a concept of what is known as portable class libraries, or PCL. And through that, you can actually be able to encapsulate a reasonably large chunk of your code, especially your domain or your business logic, into the PCLs or DLLs, and share these across your Windows Store XAML app, or even your WPF app, which could be a desktop app on Windows, as distinct from a Windows Store app, or even a Windows Phone app. And this can help you achieve some amount of code reuse. Of course, it's unlikely that you'll ever achieve 100% code reuse, because there will always be the issues of different screen sizes that you need to tackle. The phone screen size will be quite different, for example, from a tablet screen size or a very large desktop screen size. And correspondingly, the way you design your user interface may change. But a lot of your business logic and a lot of your backend access queries that you might run to access your cloud storage or your data available in a database, a lot of that can be encapsulated in some of this common code. So keep that in mind when you're architecting your solutions. If you choose to use C++, you get full support for C++ as well as integration with XAML from a front-end perspective. C++ will also enable you to access fairly low-level libraries like DirectX, which will give you really impressive performance benefits, especially when you're designing applications like games. And here are some examples around apps which are built on XAML. The camera app, the SkyDrive app, the Photos app, the Alarms app, the Maps app, all of these are built using XAML. So many of these are first-party apps that have been built by Microsoft. And you'll notice that what we've tried to do to illustrate the fact that irrespective of which technology you're using or which programming language you're using, whether it's HTML or whether it's C#, XAML, all of these are first-class citizens on Windows 8. So to illustrate that, what we've gone ahead and done is many of our first-party apps are built using both technologies. So like I gave you some examples of a whole set of apps that were created using HTML and JavaScript. Similarly, here you'll see a whole set of apps which are built using XAML and C# and so on. For those of you who are interested in building games and who are interested in really low-level, high-performance kind of applications, DirectX is your best bet or best platform to create these high-performance, high-frame rate games and visualizations. DirectX is completely supported as both from a Direct 3D as well as a Direct 2D perspective. We support not just C++, but we also support combinations of C++ with XAML, and there is a lot of interop support which is available to you. So you can design when you want to use XAML in your application, when you want to use DirectX and so on. Moving on, I want to spend a little bit of time talking a little more than just the UI, right? One of the key aspects of Windows 8 is the ability for apps to share information, not just with other parts of themselves, other parts of the app itself, but also with other apps. So for example, you might have, let's call an app X, sharing information with another app Y through what is known as a contract. One example that I can show to you is, for example, I have the Amar Chitrakatha app, which I will launch slowly. And in the Amar Chitrakatha app, let's say if I wanted to share a screenshot of some of the comic strips, let's say the free comic strips that are available. So I go into free comics and I get a set of comics that are freely available, and I wanted to share this with, let's say, a friend of mine. What I could do then is I could choose to launch the charms, and hopefully you're able to see the charms that have come on to the right hand side, and say share. And when I share, you'll notice that because Amar Chitrakatha has implemented a contract, a sharing contract, it is able to send certain amount of information to another app, which is the mail app. The mail app is a separate app. And when I click on the mail app, you'll be able to see how it transfers that information from one app to another, such that without me having to take a screenshot, copy and paste and so on, in a very simple gesture, by launching the charms and clicking the share, I can then choose to share certain information in the mail app. And now you'll notice that, for example, it's taken a screenshot, it's already done that for me, and I can directly type in the name of a email of a person and send it across. And it's already done what I require in terms of taking a screenshot. Similarly, this is not just a question of sending a screenshot. It can also be intelligent in terms of what it wants to share. So for example, if I click on one of the comics, which is, let's say, Birbal the Wise, now here in this comic, you'll notice that it also has a little bit of a synopsis about the story, summary, and so on. And so in this case, if I decide to share some information, notice the difference of what will happen. It will not just take a screenshot, but it will be a little bit smarter because of the way it has implemented the share contract. And now you'll see that it has also added some amount of text of the synopsis here, as well as the image, and it has also provided the URL from where it has obtained. And all this has happened automatically because the person or the publisher who created the Amar Chitrakatha app took advantage of what is known as the share contract. Now this is just one example of how you could take advantage of this inter-application sharing capability when you are designing your own app. Similarly, your apps can also be serving as file stores for other apps, and you can actually implement search functionality within your apps. There's a whole range of features that can be taken advantage of. The next thing I want to talk about is about Windows Azure mobile services. And this is where the cloud computing angle comes in, and we'll talk a little bit about the whole services aspect also shortly. Think of Windows Azure mobile services as a backend for your app. Insert a backend as a service, if I may call it that. And this enables you to configure notifications for your apps. It enables you to configure authentication if you want to kind of use various types of authentication are available. And if you wanted to use that using a mechanism in the cloud, you could consider using WAMS or Windows Azure mobile services. Similarly, if you had to store data, this can be a really good way for you to encapsulate your data logic and put it into a Windows Azure mobile service. The advantage of having WAMS or Windows Azure mobile services is that this backend can not only power Windows apps or Windows 8 apps, it can also power iOS apps, it can also power Android apps. Windows Azure mobile services is designed to be multi-platform in the sense that it can actually support apps which are across multiple platforms, and you can use this as a kind of a backend for apps that are spanning across different kinds of front ends. All right, so I know that we have about 10 minutes more, so I won't spend too much time on talking about how you can use Bing as a platform, but be aware that there's a whole bunch of APIs and SDKs that you can take advantage of from Bing within your apps, which includes OCR, which includes search, which includes speech, translation, maps, and so on. All of these can be taken advantage of by you as an app builder. From a services perspective, Microsoft has been at the forefront of implementing a wide range of services for many years, which includes things like SkyDrive, Xbox Live, uh, Skype, Yammer, Azure itself, and so on. And there are a wide range of mechanisms which you as an app builder can take advantage of that. SkyDrive, for example, has an API which you can take advantage of within your own apps. So when you think about Windows in the cloud, it's not just Windows, Azure, and Windows Server, but a whole range of offerings that are available both from a public cloud, a hybrid cloud, and a private cloud perspective. And you can take advantage of Active Directory in the backend, System Center, Hyper-V for uh, virtualization. All of this is available from a cloud perspective for you as an app builder and a solution provider. If you have to think of Windows Azure from a simple perspective, it not only supports IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service, but also PaaS, which is platform as a service. It also supports identity. You can also have a variety of programming models and tools. And just to be clear that some of you might be wondering about what kind of technologies you can use with Azure. We support a wide range of technologies on Azure, which includes Java, which includes PHP, Node.js, Python, Ruby on Rails, Linux, and so on. All of these are kind of supported on Windows Azure. So which means that from a server perspective, Azure can leverage a whole range of skill sets that you as a solution provider or an app builder might already have. Finally, coming to common core, this is a goal that we are moving towards. And right now, I'll be candid in saying that we haven't completely achieved it 100%, but this is a direction in which we want to move. Is that we at Microsoft want to make it reasonably easy for you as a developer to be able to address the various device form factors that are available on the left-hand side, and similarly the various cloud opportunities that exist both from a public cloud as well as from a private cloud or a hybrid cloud scenario which exists on the right hand side. And we'd like to keep the programming skills, the development tools, the frameworks, the components, the runtimes that you use as common as possible so that it simplifies your life as an app builder or a solution provider. So that's the goal and intent, and we are moving towards that direction as much as possible. Later this year, you will also hear about more initiatives that we are doing to be able to achieve that goal. So to wind up, what I'd suggest to all of you is that here's a great opportunity for you to create new experiences for your own customers, for your own users of your applications or solutions. You can reach more people. The main pitch that I make to you today is that essentially this is an opportunity for you to expand your horizons. We are not asking you to leave anything that you're currently doing. What we are saying is that this is an opportunity to take some of your existing skill sets and expand that to much more customers, expand that to much more consumers, and essentially use what you already know and build upon that. And we'll show you ways in one of my closing slides. I have a wide range of resources which will be available for you to learn from and take advantage of. Many of these resources are freely available. So fairly or at pretty much low or no cost, you'll be able to start your app development journey on Windows 8. So as promised, here's the whole range of resources that are available. I'll keep this on for some time. And in the meantime, I'll check with Srilagna if there are any questions. Some of you might want to note down these URLs. I'm going to keep this slide available, and I'm sure a recording of this webinar will also be available, so you can also take down these URLs later. As promised in the beginning of the session, we said we're going to cover the opportunity, provided a link wherein you can deep dive into the wide range of opportunity that exists on Windows. We have a dedicated resource, aka.ms/design, for helping you adapt to the modern UX design. Then there's a whole range of resources that are available for you to learn to build Windows apps. The one that I'd like to highlight is the Microsoft Virtual Academy, which has free courses available for you Many of these courses are only about 1 day long, and these are free and online. And you can take them at any time of the day. There's no real restriction. It encompasses videos, it encompasses PowerPoint decks, it encompasses some examples as well as some exercises that you can do. All of that is free on microsoftvirtualacademy.com. And of course, take advantage of all the other learning resources that are provided below that. Similarly, if you're thinking of cloud enabling your apps, Microsoft Virtual Academy also has a bunch of cloud courses that are available for free. And you can also get your 1 month free trial of Azure using the URL that I mentioned, acar.ms/Azure trial will take you to the place where you can set up your 1 month trial of Azure. Now I'll spend just 1 minute explaining a little bit about App Lab. Let's say you've started your development journey and a couple of weeks or 2 weeks later, you run into a technical issue and you don't know whom to contact. Guess what? We've set up in India, we've set up an App Lab which is designed explicitly to help you remotely with some of these issues that you might encounter while building your Windows 8 app. The email alias that you need to keep in mind is w8pitcrew@microsoft.com, which should also appear on your screen. And if you want more details, we also have a URL which tells you a little bit more about the App Lab. But feel free to take advantage of that, and you can write your technical queries to w8pitcrew@microsoft.com, and they typically take about 3 to 4 working days to respond because of the huge queue of queries that come in on a daily basis. But this is one mechanism for you to get support locally from India. And like I mentioned, we have the App Builders Club. Go to appbuildersclub.com to check out more details about that. But this is a community of technologists like yourself, app builders, solution providers, and so on, who've got together, and we have a range of offerings available for the App Builders Club. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but feel free to visit the App Builders Club website. And then those of you interested in reviewing other people's apps and learning from the apps that other people might have made or giving them feedback, we also have the app review board. And this is essentially meant for app enthusiasts to give feedback to their peers in terms of how their apps can improve. And we really would like to encourage this as a community of people so that not only can you learn from all the various resources that we provide as Microsoft, but also so that you can learn from the community itself. That is, your peers as well as people across the world. And with that, I'm going to check with Shilagna if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that really insightful presentation. We are almost running out of time. Though I have assigned you a couple of questions, I'm not sure if you will be able to take all of them now.
Maybe let's take 2 or 3.
Sure.
Let's take 2 or 3, Srilagna.
Yeah. Sure. So, request you to view the questions in your questions window on the control panel. Let me know if you can view them. If not, then I can read out the questions.
Yeah, go ahead and read it out. I can see them, but it's a little difficult to scroll.
All right. Okay. It actually, ideally, you should pick up the questions since you are going to address only 2 or 3 now, given the time frame. So how about you undock the questions window? It's the option right next to the
cross I've done
button.
Yes, I've done that. So let me go through. So the first question is by Praveen Kumar. Does the Express edition of Visual Studio provide all the features that helps developers? It provides all the features that you require to be able to create a Windows Store app. So it's pretty much fully functional in that respect. Of course, Visual Studio Professional and Visual Studio Ultimate will probably give you more features in terms of performance tuning as well as in terms of working together in a team. There are lots of additional features which are related to collaboration and so on in the advanced versions of Visual Studio. But if you're an individual or if you're a small bunch of 2 or 3 people working together, Visual Studio Express can help you do that. And just make sure that you're taking Visual Studio Express 2013 for Windows 8, because we also have other versions of Visual Studio Express. Make sure you're using the URL that I had provided there. and that should be good enough for you to get started with developing apps for the Windows Store. The next question is by Pooja around how can I develop Windows Store apps using PhoneGap? Will it be good to use PhoneGap to develop Windows Store apps with PhoneGap? So PhoneGap is good if you're thinking of targeting apps related to the to phones. So for example, Windows Phone 8, Android, iOS, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure whether it would be necessarily a good idea to use PhoneGap for Windows 8 apps, simply because you'll not be able to take advantage of Windows 8 specific features like the charms, like the contracts, like the app bar, and so on. The next question again by Pooja, how can I do localization in Windows Store app with PhoneGap? I think it's kind of related to the same previous question, but I can handle that separately also, but since it's related to PhoneGap, let's move on. Rajendra says his app is live on the Windows Store. He's getting crashes. He's not able to read that and not getting the stack trace. When he tried WinDB, he's having issues about debugging the crash dumps. Okay, good question, Rajendra. What I'd suggest is if you're still online, please post this question on the discussion forum related to this webinar so that I'm reminded about it. It looks like your case we might need to go a little bit deeper into that. So yeah, if I can request you to post a question on the discussion board, and then I will take it forward from there. Fanishwar has a question about is there a time frame for us to use the Windows 8.1 trial version? Yes, the trial version is available. You can install it anytime, but essentially once you install it, it lasts for 90 days. So basically it's a 90-day trial. Kumar Mayam says, do we have a cloud environment to develop apps rather than setting up development environment? How can we access the cloud environment? Okay, so I guess, Kumar, that your question was more in terms of is there some kind of a virtual lab that you can access? So yes, a good question. There have been some people who've asked us for setting up a virtual lab wherein you can, through a web browser log in and use it. Currently, I don't think the labs are available for Windows 8.1. There were some old labs available for Windows 8. But as soon as maybe 8.1 labs are available, we could potentially let you know. Again, Kumar, just to make sure that we follow up with you, I'd suggest if you can post a question also on the discussion forum for this webinar, then I can follow up with you as soon as a virtual environment is available. And then Neetu has a question, is there any software application with the help of which we can develop apps? So Neetu, the main software application that you will need is Visual Studio Express 2013 for Windows, so I suggest you use that. Pratik has a question, if we store data on the cloud and imagine the user does not have an internet, so how do we retrieve the data and how will we also store it using localized storage? So yeah, so obviously if the user does not have internet, you will need to store some amount of data locally in order to make the app meaningful. Remember that designing your app for a intermittently connected scenario is always a good idea. What that means is sometimes it might be connected, sometimes it might be disconnected. Pratik, if I remember correctly, I think you are in touch with the App Lab already, which is wa.pitcrew@microsoft.com. Feel free to send this question there also, and we can give you a little bit of guidance about how to design intermittently or occasionally connected applications which will suit the scenario that you are depicting. And then Shashank Srivastav's question is about what are the security risks with apps and how can we check that there is no loose end in our app? Okay, so good question, Shashank. I'm glad you're thinking about security. So one thing is, from a consumer perspective, we at Microsoft ensure that all the apps that get into the store go through a certification process. And this certification process ensures that every app from the store does not contain any malicious software. So the consumers of your apps are protected. So from that perspective, but security is much more than just malicious software, and therefore, what I can do is I can point you to a whole range of resources specifically about designing secure apps, especially when it comes to commerce transactions. Let's say if your app is having some amount of payment mechanisms, or if you have in-app purchases, how you can enable in-app purchases using a secure commerce transaction mechanism. There are specific guidance that we provided on the MSDN website regarding that, Shashank. So again, if you can post your question just as a reminder to us on the discussion forum, I'll be glad to send you the exact links about how you can enable in-app purchases and also take other security considerations into mind. Okay, so with that, Srilagna, I think I got all questions in 2 minutes.
Yeah, in fact, there are a lot of more questions pouring in, but since we have run out of
Oh, is it?
time,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
All right.
those were the only few questions that I had assigned. But yes, as you
Okay.
clearly stated, the attendees can come and visit techgig.com and probably post their queries on our discussion forum and take the conversation beyond this webinar today.
Yes. Thanks to everyone who attended and who's stayed on till now. One quick message to all of you is that we're having a follow-up webinar next week at the same time, 5 p.m. on Wednesday. And we'll spend a little bit more time talking about some areas that I had to rush through today. So if you're interested, do attend that. We'll also talk about certain interesting competitions and opportunities that are available both for organizations as well as for individuals to take part in, so that we can identify some of the best app builders and solution creators within India. Thanks everyone for your time today.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Srilagna, if you can put up the last poll before we wind up, so there are about
Yes,
100 people still there, so if you can put up the last poll.
certainly, I'll do that. Let's wait for 15-20 odd seconds and I'll close the poll. All right, the poll is closed now. The question was, are you motivated to include Windows 8 in your tech skill set in the next 3 months? 79% said yes and 21% said somewhat.
All right. Thank you, Srilagna, and thanks everyone for staying on a Wednesday evening. We look forward to having as many of you come over for a follow-up session next week. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, once
Thanks,
again.
Srilagna.
Thank you. And please, for all the attendees, the recording of today's session will be available on techgeek.com by tomorrow afternoon. So do visit. And if there is any feedback, suggestion, queries, you can either come on the discussion forum as mentioned, or you can directly email it to us. Thanks once again, Mark.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.